And there we go. So welcome everyone to the Go Wide book launch team webinar, I guess I'm calling it. It's basically a thank you, my way of saying thank you. So giving us a chance to interact and talk, and you can comment and ask questions, and I'll share some information, a little bit behind the scenes peek if you're interested, and then we'll take it from there. So let's go. So first of all, thank you. Because of the people on this launch team, on the day of the release, which was May 23rd, Go Wide reached #1 bestseller status in the theology category, which is actually a pretty big category in Canada. And it stayed there for a bit, then went down a bit, and I think it was still in hot new releases for most of the week. So that's entirely up to, or thanks to, the efforts of the book launch team. So I appreciate that a whole lot. That's what a book launch team does, and this book launch team did it well. So shout out to all of you all. So the plan for tonight is a little bit of behind the scenes with me, Matt, and then I'll open it up to questions and comments. And if you think of a question and you want to get it out right away, feel free to just type it, question or comment, in the chat, and I will read it out, or you can read it out when we get to that section, as you wish, or you can raise your hand so that I know that you have a question, and then I'll call on you and we'll take it from there. And if you want to comment to each other, that's totally fine too. And things that I would be interested to know, if you want to include that in your comments, is what part of the book resonated for you? What part of the book challenged you or made you wonder a little bit? And what was your experience like of being on the book launch team? If you've ever done that before, or if not, I'm just interested in some feedback. So as I write my millions of books after this, to know how I could do things better or do things differently, or what was good just the way it was. So just for my information, I'd be interested in hearing from you about that if you want to share that with me. So let's start with behind the scenes. And of course, we start with a little image of the cat there hissing at the screen. That's not me. I'm just letting you know. I know it looks just like me, but it's not me. And oops, I'm trying to pause that, but you can't quite. That's okay. Anyway, if it's distracting, I'm sorry. So one of the questions I thought I might address is, why did I write the book? I know I mentioned some of that in the introduction, but it's more than just one thing, as it always is. And I think one of the main things was theology based on power / restriction was just not very satisfying for me. And I think in the younger years, because I was raised in the church, in the Mennonite church, which can be quite restrictive. And there's a certain comfort in that. You know exactly where the boundaries are, where the lines are. You're certain of what you believe. You're certain who belongs and who doesn't. But as you mature and grow older and encounter more of the world, you realize that's not very satisfying, the very bounded kind of way of living, or the bounded set, we might call it, not very satisfying to me. So I started asking questions. And I read and heard other theologians, other people thinking about this, and they were doing this in a more collaborative way, or a more justice-oriented way, or a more community-oriented way. And that started to kind of go, oh, there's a different way of looking at this. Instead of God being the supreme almighty being who's in charge of everything and tells everyone what to do, and it just happens exactly how God wants, that there's other ways of actually thinking about this and ways of being. So I started to explore that more, to see if that could be a thing, if that could be a way forward for me. And then I went to graduate school for theology, and I actually was given permission to try out new ideas. And actually it was encouraged, like, read very widely, read things you disagree with, or read things that you've never even thought of before, read from people from different traditions, read people that are kind of post theology or mixing theology with philosophy, like just read very broadly. And you have permission to try out a whole bunch of new ideas and see if they have any traction. Now, you not only have permission in graduate studies, but you're expected to do that, to try out new ideas to see if they have any traction. So that was just a wonderful experience, because that was not my experience in the church. Permission and encouragement to try out new ideas and explore different ways of thinking about God and the biblical texts. You all's experience might have been different in the church, but that was mine. And where did my material or ideas come from? The cloud, directly from Jesus. No. Variety of sources. One of the things I noted as I kind of tried to trace where these ideas came from was in my dissertation, which was actually on collaboration, divine human collaboration. As I was writing it, I was thinking, is this true? Could it really be that God wants to collaborate with human beings? And it's a much, instead of being, this kind of up down, I tell you what to do, God tells us what to do, that it could be much more maybe side by side, working together in a way. So as I was writing, I kept going, I don't know, this feels weird. Should I be writing this? But I went, that's my job, to try new things and ideas and see if they actually can be supported. So in my dissertation, I was already working on that collaboration, kind of not using the vertical paradigm. And then I started doing conference presentations, and usually present at academic conferences on what you're currently working on or something of interest. And in 2017, I presented a paper called Toppling the Divine Hierarchy. And I very much looked at vertical models and critiqued vertical models of looking at God, and especially how God as the Almighty One or the Omnipotent One was slightly problematic as a primary metaphor for God. I got quite a bit of pushback at that conference for suggesting that. And one man even got up and said, I suggested that I didn't quite know what I was talking about and I should do more research. So this is theology is filled with white men who know better than you do. So it wasn't totally unexpected. At least that's my experience as a woman, female. It also came from sermons. I would speak quite frequently in our church in Montreal, and I love the stories, especially in the Hebrew Bible. I love the stories of Jesus interacting with people. And I just started to unpack those stories and see what's here that I haven't maybe seen before. And some of those interpretations found their way into the book, and especially what is it, noting the social location of the different characters, and what are the exceptions that this story is maybe telling us to the dominant kind of culture of the day, or the hierarchy of the day. And blogs. I would write blogs. I don't write as many these days, about what I was thinking about, what I was reading, what I was studying, all these kinds of things. And so in coming up with the outline for the book, I looked at a lot of my blogs and say, what am I like, where's the thread? Oh, you're already writing a lot about this kind of stuff. That's what you're thinking about. That could be a theme and be made into a longer work. So I drew on the ideas I was already thinking about. And the classroom. I was teaching in an Anglican seminary ministry school in New Brunswick. New Brunswick's the center of the universe, basically. But I was teaching in a classroom there and teaching on building Christian community. So a lot of those ideas that I researched for that class found their way into the chapter on kingdom and church. And just like some of the responses from the students and the questions that they had kind of helped me know which things I had to develop more or had to think about more, or which things were helpful to people. And my personal reading and my news feeds. So I'm always doing reading, maybe a little bit of fiction here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And my news feeds, I've been very intentional in the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years of putting people in my news feeds that have different lived experience than I do, have a different social location than I do, and talk publicly about that in their social media. And people that are knowledgeable about things that I might not be. So I get a lot of insight, should I say, or even what would you call that? Like, whoa, I never thought of it that way, from people that have different experience, are more knowledgeable about some of these things than I am, and they lead me to other sources as well. So it's very good to have a diverse kind of news feed. I found that really, really helpful, informed me a lot, because I only have my experience to draw from, and to really see how other people see the world or interact, or even what their experience has been with theology in the church is helpful to know, instead of just assuming that everyone's experience was similar to mine. Oh, that's the end of that. So a second question I have to answer is, what are my writing practices? And I know some on here are writers. Some might be thinking about writing. I don't know. I'm always fascinated to read books by writers, to see what their writing practices are and what works for them, and what they've developed and learned over their years in writing. And some work for me and others don't. So I'm always interested to gather from different people. So in case someone's interested, I'll talk a little bit about my writing practices. If you're not interested, you can go have some more pancakes. Brian will send you some. Have a plan or a schedule. I know I used to in my younger years just write when I was inspired. Oh, I saw a lovely tree or something and I want to write about it or something. But when you're doing serious writing or studying or anything like, or a longer project like a book, you have to have a plan or a schedule. Mine was really, really loose. It was just write Monday through Friday, try to write at least a page. That was it. And I knew my best time to write was not the morning. I'm not a morning person. So no writing. Like, I know for people that get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they write, that's their best time. The family's sleeping, the house is quiet, write from 6 to 8. And I'm going, there would be no book if that was what I was doing. So I know after lunch, my brain wakes up and it's like, ooh, starts making connections and I have ideas. So I know my best time to write. Some days it was 5 o'clock and I went, I just won't write today. And I went, no, it doesn't matter that it's 5 o'clock. Just sit down and type a sentence. That's what I would tell myself. Tricky. I'm tricking myself. Just sit down and write a sentence. So it's 5 o'clock. So I'd write down and I'd get 2 hours of productive work done. And my day started at 5. But that's just because I know myself. That's when I function best. I really get productive in the afternoon. So I had a very loose plan and schedule, which was just sit down every day and do something, whether it's write new stuff or do some more research or work on your bibliography. Doesn't matter. Do something on the book so that your head's in that space. Draw on what you are already working on. So it doesn't all have to be new material. If there's one thing, and you know this about authors that you know, they seem to write about 1 or 2 or 3 things a lot, and they'll different aspects of it, but you recognize their voice because they're always talking about this thing or in this way or coming at it from a particular angle, and that kind of identifies who they are and what they have to say to the world. So don't feel like you have to reinvent everything new every single time. Find your voice and what the things that you're drawn to, that you're interested in, that you know something about, and then just work on deepening that, widening that, finding another angle to it. And there's endless material if you find that thing or those things that you're interested in. Give time to let your subconscious make connections. I don't think this is just me, but sometimes I'd be stuck and I'm going, I don't know what to say about this next, or I can't figure out this problem, or this part of the story doesn't make sense to me. And I'm trying to solve the problem. I'm thinking my way through it or researching my way through it, and it's not getting anywhere. And I know from experience, maybe just go to bed, have a good sleep, maybe go do something else. And really, sometimes I will dream the solution because my subconscious is making those connections. You just have to give it time to process that. Subconscious is your best friend sometimes, I think, because it knows things at a deeper level than we actually kind of acknowledge in our thinking and our waking life. So that's happened a few times. I would just go to sleep, and the next morning I went, oh, that's the way to approach that, or I didn't see that before, or just lay it aside and work on another chapter. It's okay to just, I'm a slow processor, slow reader, slow writer, and I just know that about myself. My mind, my body, everything likes to process things, and it takes a while to do that. And I think that's fine. That's how you work. Then be that way. Don't try and rush that. Don't work against how you naturally process things. Work with that, and you'll have a much happier process. You'll be happier with yourself, and it'll be more pleasant process. See what is missing, or think of possible objections. This is if you're doing maybe a larger project. Chapter 1, narrow versus wide, is one of the last chapters that I wrote, because I wrote all this stuff on wide, 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 expansive, expansive. And then I thought, you know what? You should just address kind of a possible objection, or some, a difficulty that people might have in saying, well, I don't know if this really works. So I wrote that. It was at the end of the book. And then I realized, actually, that's the first thing to address. So in one of my editing sessions, I jumped it to the beginning, and it is actually the chapter that the most people have commented on my world tour. That was the chapter most people pointed to. Whether that meant that's as far as they got in the book, but that really seemed to say that really made me think. So there you go. And this goes back to kind of my news feed. I do the same thing with my sources. Again, theology has been filled with men who are from European descent. It's just the theology classics. That's what it is for the most part. So I've been very intentional about drawing on others, drawing on women authors, drawing on people from different cultures and backgrounds, and people that have different experiences, and even different disciplines, because we're all richer when we do that. I'm richer for it. The study itself is richer for it, I think. And I try to be intentional about that. And it can be, it used to be a little more difficult finding diverse sources in theology, just because the go-to sources, and you just go in the library and that's who's published, right? Even now, I look at, I subscribe to some publishers, and they'll say new books by authors on the topic of theology or biblical studies, and I'll look, I'm going, when is the first woman's name going to come up? And it takes a while to get down the list. So it's still fairly common. So you have to be intentional about that, or otherwise the default is it ends up being very much one particular kind of voice. And don't do it alone. For me, when I started writing, and it was the pandemic, I had this mantra in my head that said, don't do this alone. You can't do it alone, really. I know writing is a solitary enterprise mostly, and you do it by yourself. But I thought, you don't want to do this alone, because you're just one perspective, really. And so I decided, number one, I'm going to get a writing buddy, meaning every month I met with someone, we exchanged writing, and then we commented and talked about and whatever feedback they had. And so that was really helpful, once a month having a meeting with someone to just have the first pair of eyes on it. And because my question is always, is this even anything? I don't know. Does this make sense? And the feedback was encouraging. And also they caught some things that they said, I don't understand that, or this is really good. So I would highlight that more, and then unpack other things more that needed more work. The second thing I decided is I don't want to self-publish. That's great for some people. And I thought, I want another pair of eyes on this and help in the publishing process, so that I think it's just going to be better for me and the publisher I'm with, which is Choir Publishing. is a collective of writers, and it's run by writers. And so it's a community. We do like hive mind. We, share and support each other. And so it's really, really what I wanted. I wanted a community setting for what is usually really, really solitary. So that worked out well for me. And what are some interesting moments from the book tour? Yes, I call it the World Book Tour. It's a running joke because I had my launch in Montreal, and then I went to Winnipeg and Winkler. Come on. So I call it World Book Tour. Why not? This picture is from Winkler. I was in the library. This is the front half of the room. That was actually my largest crowd, was in Winkler, in my hometown. So just a few highlights. The variety of people that kind of found the ideas in the book engaging, I found very encouraging, because that was my goal. I'm not writing to a particular audience. I'm not writing about issues necessarily. I'm writing about our ideas of God and the world and the biblical texts and how we read and interpret them before we ever get into issues, because I think you have to back that way up, because how we address issues results from where we've already started from. So anyway, so the variety of people that found the book engaging, I was very encouraged by that. So I had an Orthodox priest at one of the meetings. I had far-right conservatives from my hometown. Of course, I expected them to show up there. Ex-evangelicals, post-church people that said, no longer go to church, don't need it, don't want it. I had people that were deconstructing and asking lots of questions. I had people that were just curious. They're going, what is this? A friend told me to come. And then I had people that just came to support me, and I'm not sure they understood most of what I said, and that's totally fine. There were snacks, so it's fine. Okay, in Winkler, all my cousins showed up. I am one of the youngest cousin in that family. So they're all older cousins. Most of them are retired, and they just show up en masse. I don't know if they understood what I was saying. They bought books. They wanted me to sign them. It was just fabulous. And I'm thinking, everybody needs this kind of support from their cousins. So that was a nice surprise. And the Kevins. So again, this was from Winkler. There was two people in the audience that, when all of you do public stuff, maybe, yes? When you look into a room, when you're presenting or you're speaking and you look at the room, there are people whose faces are lit up and they're all engaged. It's just their body language, right? Doesn't mean they're more attentive than others, but their body language is so open and interesting, and it's like they're still like this the whole time. Anyway, these were the two Kevins in Winkler. So that's the people you speak to, because they're giving you energy, right? And one Kevin, he'd lived in San Francisco, and then I think he went to Indiana. Anyway, he lived a lot of places, and now he was in Winkler on the prairies, a small little conservative Mennonite town. I didn't ask. I didn't have time. I would have loved to hear his story. But he said, from living different places, he said, I know how much our landscape shapes our worldview, no matter where we are, because every place I've lived has really informed and changed and invited me to discover a new part of who I am and to connect with it and to find a way to be on that land in a respectful and good way. And I found that really insightful. And the other Kevin said, because he's a pastor there in the heart of conservative Canada, because this is where Max Bernier is trying to get elected, because he thinks that if I have a chance of getting elected People's Party of Canada, this is where it would be. So anyway, I didn't know that, but there he is. Anyway, and he said, here we see people saying mandate freedom. And he said, how do you reconcile that with then this impulse to force their values on others? And that it's not really related to freedom, right? And I thought it was, first of all, brave to ask in the town. But yeah, and we just talked a bit about that tension where we all want freedom, but we mostly want it for ourselves. And the impulse is to protect our values and our way of life, and that we see as freedom. And we sometimes neglect to to see that other people's freedoms are being taken away, or their rights are being infringed on, or we're making their life more difficult in some way because we want to mandate our version of freedom. Anyway, a very thoughtful question to ask in that location. And then I also had someone ask, do you believe that Jews are God's chosen people? Interesting question. Well, this was, I know the person that asked this, and this was a test question for me to see if I was, anyway, I answered it. It was fine. I said, yes, the Jews are God's chosen people. Everyone's God's chosen people, because God chooses everyone to bring, referring to the Abrahamic covenant of, I choose to bless you so that you can bless the nations of the world. It's like saying, I choose to give $100 to Brian Metzger so that he can pay for lunch for everyone. Is Brian the chosen one by me? Yes, he is. But is everyone else chosen? Yes, because everyone's getting free lunch. No pressure, Brian. It's whenever you want. So anyway, that was interesting to have one of those questions where they're just trying to trick you a little bit. And some of the best questions I had was from an interview that was done in Montreal. I had an interviewer who had read the chapter that I was reading from and came up with very thoughtful questions. And her last question for me was, at this point in your life journey, how do you aspire to act in the world? And I really thought that was a good question, because it tried to make it more concrete, because theology can just remain in the theoretical realm. And this was like, well, how does this change how you act in the world? So that was one of my favorite questions. And I can't remember the answers, but they were really, really good. And someone else, this was in Winnipeg, they said, well, what's on your news feed? Do you have any recommendations? And I'm going, ooh, and they said, you should write a blog about it. Who do you recommend to follow? So anyway, a good suggestion. I thought that's a good idea. Maybe I will do that at some point. And now we turn it over to you if you have any questions or comments. Again, you can just, the group's small enough, so we could probably maybe just butt in if you want. Sure. But I see a question ready from Jen. And there's the questions that I just have that I would be interested to hear from you, but we'll get to those if we get to them. And if not, that's fine too. So I'll stop sharing and I will stop recording, if I can figure that out.